All right, folks, it's not quite there. Game week next week, but there is a game week this week for some others in college football, so we all can take some pleasure in that. Kick back, check out week 0, get ready for Oklahoma football against UTEP, of course, on September 3rd. Welcome to Sooners Live for a 76th edition right here at the Voice of College Football. Jason Ray's on the line, of course, making it all go. Jason, how you doing today?
Doing wonderful, Mark. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Appreciate you being here and making this all go. Jason jumped on just a couple days ago to knock out a fall camp update, recruiting, and answer your questions. So not only do we provide our weekly chat with Jason here on Sooners Live every Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Central, but Jason will jump on from time to time to provide a live update. So be looking out for those. And one of the important reasons why, in addition to subscribing, to hit that bell to get notified of those updates. All right, Jason, we're getting down to kind of serious time in regards to coaches figuring out who's going to get playing time, who's winning spots. We're just a little over a week right now. So what is the latest that you've been able to gather from fall camp?
Yeah, so as from a camp perspective, I think it ended last week with school starting this week for Oklahoma. So it's a little bit different. They're so obviously still going through practice and prep and stuff like that. And so, there's a few positions where there's very close, I think, interesting battles still going on. I think on the offensive line side of it, everything that I've seen and heard kind of pointed to Savion Byrd, who's a redshirt freshman who has kind of overtaken Chris Murray, the UCLA transfer that was a starter last year at that right guard position. I think partly because Chris Murray has been a little bit banged up, but I think partly it's a kid that Beatonbow raved about last year, Mark, and a guy that really just, from a technique perspective and just from a overall understanding of the playbook, probably couldn't quite get on the field or make the time, that he take advantage of that he really needed to get on the field. So I think that's a really significant battle, kind of still going to go back and forth between Byrd and Murray on the offensive line. I think some of the other areas of the offenses are fairly solidified. There's no real battle at the quarterback position. I think it's firmly entrenched with Gabriel at 1, and then you've got Davis Bevel, who I think is impressed enough to get that number 2 spot. I think Marcus Major has solidified himself as the number 2 running back right now behind Eric Gray, with a host of kids I think probably behind them. I would lean towards probably led by Javonte Barnes at the 3rd spot, but then you've got Bentavious Thompson, you've got Gavin Salchuk, you've got Tawee Walker, and a few others that are in that group. And one of the things that we've talked about from time to time, Mark, was related to Jeff Levy's offense. A lot of kids get carries. There was three kids last year, maybe 4, I can't remember, 3 or 4 kids from Ole Miss last year that got over 100 carries. And so Matt Corral was part of that got over 100. So you would absolutely expect that Dylan Gabriel would not get anywhere near the carries that Matt Corral would. And so I think all signs point to 3 backs probably getting in the neighborhood of 100 carries, and some others getting to 40 to 50 carries throughout the year, maybe a little bit more. So that'll be interesting to see how that is. But I think the top 3 are pretty are fairly solidified. On the defensive side of the ball, I think your defensive line, I think your top 4, again, your starting 4 are pretty set in stone on the ends. You'll have Ethan Downs and Reggie Grimes. I think in the middle, from a nose tackle and defensive tackle perspective, you'll see Jeffrey Johnson and Jalen Redmond there as well. I think the biggest probably competition that's still going on, and I think Oklahoma fans will probably cringe a little bit when you hear this name, but what I'm hearing and seeing is Jaden Davis is probably right now the opposite cornerback from Woody Washington. And when I say cringe, he's not necessarily he's had a lot of inconsistencies. He doesn't have the height that some of the other ones have, or maybe some of the same athletic ability. But I think you've got to trust the coaching staff, I think, at this point. But I think it's the biggest surprise that I would see out of fall camp overall would be if Jaden Davis was one of the starting cornerbacks. So not necessarily in a bad way, Mark. You got kids that have a renewed sense of enthusiasm, or they feel different with a new staff coming in, and things like that. So, but I think most people probably didn't have him in their top four overall at that position coming in the fall camp. So I think he's done. He must have done a really really good job to earn that trust, at least early on. So far, I think that's still fluid, right? I think that will still be something that keeps going from a battle perspective in fall camp. And I think the other thing that's a little bit surprising to at least me is, Oklahoma got a couple of two or three guys that I thought at least two of them were really going to be plug and play guys. Trey Morrison came over from North Carolina. CJ Colton came over from Wyoming. You kind of had the assumption that those two kids would just plug and play at the nickel spot and at the one of the cornerback spots, and it's not been the case. And you have to think that you have to give that as a testament to these kids that are currently here, because those kids have played a lot of football both at North Carolina and Wyoming, and even Kanai Walker to a certain extent. He's a younger kid, obviously, for only 1 year at Louisville there, but yeah, that's interesting. It's a good story. I think if it continues to materialize for Jaden Davis there across the board. So I think, but overall, Mark, I think the good thing is that you look at coming into the season is right now that you're pleased with. If you're Oklahoma, pleased with the effort, pleased with that. Brent Venables is very pleased with where they're at heading into this opening week, but I think you're also pleased with the development of Justin Harrington. Certainly, kind of came out of nowhere, so to speak, in terms of there was a story about him this week where he begged and pleaded with Venables. Wrote called, text, wrote letters on numerous occasions to try to get back into the program, and he finally got back. And so he's a guy has been a little bit of a Swiss Army knife in the back end of the defense. He's a guy that can play that cheetah position. He can play nickel. He can play either the safety positions, and maybe could even play a little bit of corner. So I think it'll be interesting just in the mold of trying to get your best 11 players on the field at one time to see what that looks like. But over and above, you've got the TD Roof injury, but you don't have any other serious injuries out of fall camp, which is always going to be a big plus coming into the season.
Appreciate the comments and questions coming in here at the Voice of College Football. And while we're picking them off, we might as well get right into this one with, no, I'm sorry. I missed the comment. I'll back up here. So before we get to that one, there's a comment here before we get to the one that I just intended to get to, where Ryan says he expects Marcus Major running back 2. Man, I am losing track of these comments. There was another one made here about expecting Eric Gray to be down to running back 3 by midseason.
Yeah, I don't necessarily see that. Now, I could definitely see, could absolutely see a situation where Marcus Major elevates himself to running back 1 and Gray's a little bit on the outside looking in. But you have to remember, as we pointed out in the open, that these top 3 guys that are all going to get a lot of carries, right? So he's gonna put the difference here is I think you're going to see Gray be put in a much more better position to be successful than he was last year. You're not going to run him 15 to 20 times between the tackles. You're going to get him outside. You're going to get him in the passing game a lot. So yeah, I think just like the wide receiver room and the running back room is similar in the fact that you really really like where you are at this year from a just an overall room and a depth perspective. Coming into the season, I'm extremely excited about this wide receiver group. I think it's going to be, and we'll get into that a little bit with some freshmen, but a little bit later. But I think you've got tons of depth in there that you probably haven't had both at the running back and the wide receiver spot. So you've probably got about 7 or 8 guys legitimately on the wide receiver side that is going to get some serious playing time, and then you probably got 5 or 6 in the running back room that could absolutely play this year.
So there's this comment from Six Pack. Realistically, how much fall off will the Sooners offense have if Dylan Gabriel goes down? Well, before Jason jumps in on this one, I just think that any team in the country, unless they just had a significant battle for the quarterback job where 2 guys are neck and neck and there has to be a determination made and who knows who's better, you got to see them against live action, and it's one of those deals when you have a proven top flight quarterback, like is the case here, versus some other guys who are capable, otherwise they wouldn't be at Oklahoma, but they're not much tested. We know Davis Bevel, with one performance in the Peach Bowl, showed some good, showed a big mistake at the end, but played fairly well in a very conservative approach, which is understandable. That there's going to be, you would guess there's going to be, and it's all a guess for all of us, I won't say significant, but decided drop off.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Mark. I think probably hovers the line between those two that you'd mentioned, and I think obviously timing would be key. Like, what opponents do you have when he's out and things like that, if he's out. So I think, but I do agree with you. There's going to be a fairly deep, fairly significant drop off, if he was to go down for a certain period of time. Now, I'm not necessarily one of those that thinks if he went down for a considerable amount of time, like they're facing 7-5 at this point, right? I think now if they had the same roster that they had in the spring, and you're relying on Nick Evers or somebody else, then maybe just from a youth perspective, maybe I feel a little bit that way. But I think Davis Bevel would be more than serviceable. Yeah, there will be a drop off, but I think he's a guy that could help them win some games, right? To the extent that you mentioned a little bit of experience last year, and very little, but yes, he does have a little bit of experience there as well. So yeah, there'll be a drop off, but I think a lot of things that I've seen and heard that people think that it's going downhill extremely quickly if he goes down. I mean, I think it all comes down to the supporting cast, right, that you have around. If the offensive line is playing better, the running game and the wide receivers are better, much better than they were last year, then certainly you've got that supporting cast to kind of help him. But yeah, it'll be a drop off, but it would be interesting to see. Definitely don't want to see that, but if it happens, to see what the impact really would look like.
There are plenty of examples out there in recent college football history of quarterbacks going down and their replacements doing a serviceable job with a quality program that they're able to sustain something close to what they were anyway. So I would not expect them. I would expect them to still be a Big 12 title contender, even with a backup quarterback, unless just every game was some excruciating last second loss and they just had a run of those and went 8-4, but they were this close to being right there just because they had a lot of bad breaks at the wrong times or something like that. All right, folks. Sooners Live. We're here every Wednesday, 11:30 a.m. Central Time. Appreciate everybody being here. And of course, 1 week from today, we will preview the UTEP game, and we will line up some media guests from the opponent's side each week. And yes, we're going to be wise when it comes to when it's UTEP. We'll get them in here. We just want a quick look at UTEP. We'll get them out of here. We're not going to talk about UTEP for 45 minutes, but we'll get them in here for 5 minutes and just get a look at UTEP so everyone knows who we're playing and what it looks like. But when it's Texas, of course, that's going to be a really good conversation. And so we will, of course, look at the better games more in depth with our guests. But we hope to line those up each and every week. And it'll be certainly great to be in game week mode 1 week from today. All right, we might as well get into this one. Jason just filled me in on this one as we headed to air. And this is coming in from Okie. So this is Stuart Mandel from On 3, correct? The Athletic. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Athletic.
The Athletic, who has predicted Oklahoma to go 7-5. And I believe based on Okie's post here and otherwise 5-4 in the Big 12. Okay. I would think that most people believe that Oklahoma is a better team than that, including myself. I've got my prediction out there. I posted the video this week if you want to check that out. But what's funny is, and I told you this, Jason, and you may have experienced this at some point in making predictions, that if you put them all out there with records, then people start to make the connections. Okay, well, if you've got them at such and such record, you've got them at such and such record, that means that out of conference, they're going to beat them, and they put it all together. And you got to watch yourself because sometimes you box yourself into a corner. And he's got an interesting, not just record for Oklahoma, but by connection, Nebraska and its wins and losses.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Oklahoma social media, specifically Oklahoma Twitter, just they are the most, I think, one of the most sensitive fan bases in the country because of things like that. And so, I think this brought some light to what's a worst case scenario for Oklahoma, and I think what's a best case scenario for Oklahoma. Before we get to that, to your point, Mark, when some folks started asking some questions, they had both Oklahoma and Nebraska going 2-1 in non-conference, and so that even raised more questions. And he had Nebraska winning Saturday against Northwestern, and then coming back off the trip from Ireland back to Nebraska to lose to North Dakota, and then turn around and beat Oklahoma a couple of weeks later, which, I mean, obviously anything can happen. Would be shocked. I mean, obviously more shocked at the second loss to North Dakota than anything else. But yeah, I mean, I think and he's a little bit on an island. I haven't seen too many 7-5 area predictions for Oklahoma. I mean, now I think you could see, being objective here, I think you could see like a worst case for Oklahoma would be 7-5. Maybe a best case is 12-0, right? I mean, I think they could potentially. I think it's difficult, but I think it would be more likely to see Oklahoma go 12-0 than it would to see them go 7-5. I think what 7-5 looks like for Oklahoma is a fair amount of injuries, a fair amount of, I don't know that I would say regression, but a fair amount of non-improved offensive line play, a fair amount of defensive play that is not up to the standards that Venables and staff brings in. Now on the other side, 12-0 is also a bit of a stretch given the fact that how much there's a newness to this staff, a newness to the players and stuff like that. Now, in terms of this last comment here, I think in terms of the fan base, do they turn on BV? I don't think so. I think it would depend on the manner. I think anything minus a losing season, I think he would still have the support that he needs to. But if you throw out a 6-6 and 7-5, you better have massive improvements in year 2. And so, I mean, for me, I've predicted on our show last. I know we didn't put records, but I think Oklahoma's really probably 10-2, 11-2. And I think this would be a great season for them. They go 11-2. They make a New Year's Six bowl game. They're just on the outside looking in on a playoff berth, and that builds towards next season. So yeah, I think, like I said, it's one of the most interesting years for Oklahoma because you've seen Oklahoma picked anywhere between those two. I don't know that I've seen hardly anyone pick Oklahoma to go undefeated, but I've seen a few amount of 11-1s out there, and very few 7-5s. So yeah, I mean, I think it's but I think in this whole vein, I've said this over and over again, and I'm going to continue until the game's over. But the Nebraska game for both teams is just so pivotal on both sides of it to see what that trajectory looks like for the rest of the season. Going forward for both teams.
It's funny. We talk probably, aside from Texas, more Nebraska than any team just because of the setup of the game. And then once we move past that game, obviously, I don't think we'll talk any Nebraska football on here, but there's obviously a historical rivalry. Plus, it's the big non-conference game this year, and it turned out to be a decent game last year with Oklahoma being a heavy favorite. Nebraska is a 13.5-point favorite this Saturday, and I don't think Northwestern's that good at all. I think they're one of the 3 worst teams in the Big Ten until proven otherwise. So based on talent and roster personnel and even the results from last year, if you take away the scoreboard and just watch the performance on the field, I think it's certainly understandable, 13.5. But when in the world has Nebraska covered 13 points? So I just I'm intrigued to see this game because I don't know. Maybe it's because I've become a bit jaded, wouldn't be the right word, because I've got no emotional investment in it, but because I've got a Nebraska channel and Nebraska show, and certainly those Nebraska fans are invested, and they're very excited about this season. But man, they were excited about last season too, and Illinois came out and beat them in game 1. And just Northwestern is just one of those teams that they're so well coached that I could just see a sloppy 17-13 loss.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Obviously, Nebraska is going to be, I think, for a couple of reasons too. I mean, you're exactly right. We probably won't talk as much about that after the 17th, but I think Nebraska is always, I think, somewhat near and dear to Oklahoma's hearts just because of the rivalry that they've had through the years. But generally speaking, I mean, you never know. I'm like, you don't really know what you have. I mean, I think you have an idea of what your team is going to be like, but how do they react traveling to Ireland and doing that? And I don't know the time differences locally. I don't know what time that game actually.
6 hours.
6 hours. Okay.
Yeah, we talked to our Nebraska guy last night. It was 6 Central, and it was midnight there.
Oh, okay. So, but it's a different. If it's a different situation, it's a different game. You got to leave so much earlier, and so you're out of any kind of normal routine that you would normally be in typically from an away game perspective. So I know the thing that I continue to kind of think through and come away with looking at this game Saturday is you've got a little bit of the revenge factor from last year, right, with the 49-point win that Nebraska had over Northwestern, and you've got the factor of you'd mentioned this, Mark, about how good of a coach Fitzgerald is, and typically, in his career with Northwestern, if they've thrown out a subpar season, then the next season it's a fairly decent turnaround. Now, this one, I mean, I'm with you. I don't know that they necessarily have the talent right now to be able to turn that around. I don't, they were just anemic on offense last year. I think 16 points a game is what they averaged, and quarterback play was not good. And I think Helinski's still the guy there. I haven't heard an official announcement or if there was even a competition.
I don't believe that there has been an announcement. And we talked to a Northwestern guy from Rivals yesterday, and he said no announcement, but Helinski's expected.
So yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. Yeah, I mean, who knows? Like it's so difficult to predict what Nebraska is going to look like. But I think, from some of the people around here that I know, that the extent of Casey Thompson's thumb injury last year was much greater than anybody would ever give that credit for. And I think he was like around the 24 touchdown, 7-8 interception guy last year. So I think that's probably a pretty clear, I would say, at least coming into the season, improvement over Adrian Martinez, at least from a production and a ball protection perspective. So, but yeah, that'll. I don't know what, obviously Texas has more talent than Nebraska, but yeah, I mean it's imperative. I mean it's critical for Nebraska to win this game. Not only for them, but for Frost. He's probably going to have to win 7, maybe 8 games to keep his job. So if they lose this one, that's a big hill to overcome.
Yeah, Oklahoma fans, you get to see Casey Thompson this Saturday suiting up for Nebraska. And of course, you saw him throw 5 touchdowns against Sooners last year with no picks. Had a great game, of course, in the big comeback win by OU. Join our Discord. You go to patreon.com, search Mark Rogers TV. We add members in Discord every day, so the conversation becomes more and more lively and becomes more and more diverse to whatever you want to talk about concerning college football. But we've got various conference chats, and so just you can just sign up there on patreon.com, Mark Rogers TV. And you also get this, you get Jason's predictions on Patreon as well.
That's right.
And you get mine, but mostly you get Jason's.
Mark's a machine against the spread, y'all.
Well, no. I hate when people make comments like that. I think it's just setting me up for a big downfall. But I was now let's understand that I serve up. So we got Jason, we got like 15 other media members, and I give them the 12 games that we're going to select. Now, I try to select the 12 best games of the week. So they're kind of boxed in by whatever 12 games I select. So some of them select other games, of course, on their own prediction sites. But yeah, I was able to eke out a first place against the spread and straight up. But that was last year. So we'll see. All right. In regards to, you had brought it up a few minutes ago, I think people are always anxious and wanting to forecast what freshmen are going to make a big splash.
Yeah, so there's a few. I've got around, and a couple of them may be a stretch. And when I say make an impact, there's going to be more, obviously, on this list, Mark, that I have that will, play in their 4 games and then, take that red shirt, right? But these are guys that I think will play more than those 4 games and will make an impact in some way, shape, or form. So let's start on the offensive side of the ball, and then we'll move defensively. So I think probably the biggest impact player on the offensive side of the ball, from a, well, I hate to say one person, there's 2 that I think, true freshman, Javante Barnes. We've talked about him a decent amount. I think he's going to be in the rotation. I think he's probably going to be at the very least the number 3 running back right now, coming into the season. So he'll get plenty of carries. He'll get plenty of playing time. Kind of depends on how he takes in the other parts of the offense, right? How is he, catching the ball out of the backfield? How is he able to, pick up blitzers and things like that, pass protection type of stuff. Jaden Gibson is another one who continues to make play after play after play in the fall. If nothing else, he's going to be a considerable weapon in the red zone with his height, but made a huge, incredibly acrobatic one-handed catch in one of their final scrimmages. So I think he's going to be a guy that, is a weapon for Oklahoma, and wouldn't be surprised if by the middle of the year he's in he's a more dedicated role, I guess you would say, and maybe a starter or something like that. So those are the first two guys. Gavin Sawchuk is a guy that a little on the fence on. I mean, I think in between whether he's going to get his opportunities from a 4-game perspective, or if he will be, if he's too good to keep him off the field. I think I think his speed is impressive. One of the fastest guys on the team. I think his ability to get to get to the second level and break off some big runs, and then he may have a role from a kickoff return perspective as well, and or special teams just in general. So he's one that I lean towards will get a full year, but then we'll see how that goes. Let's see, and then I think there's a couple more. Nick Anderson, from a wide receiver perspective, I think he's one of those guys that may be a little bit more difficult to see him on the field, but I think he plays a role on this team. Gavin Freeman, again, I think his role is maybe a little bit at wide receiver. He's a true freshman walk-on who, anytime Venables talks, he raves about this kid. So absolutely special teams guy, maybe somebody that gets a little bit of run from a wide receiver perspective. And then when you move to the defensive side of the ball, again, the defense is going to be an area where maybe not quite as many people see the field, especially depending on what that position looks like. Jaron Kanik is a guy that will get some playing time. We'll see where that ends up, if it ends up being primarily special teams or maybe at that cheetah position a little bit, or just at a linebacker spot. And then our Mason Thomas is one that's probably interesting to some people. If people remember him, he'd been an Iowa State commit for a while, but later in that recruiting cycle last year, it's like people just missed him, and then he had offers he started getting offers from a ton of different teams. Georgia, I think, was one. Maybe Notre Dame was one. And I know Oklahoma got in there obviously later and got him. I think he's a guy that's going to play a decent amount, particularly from a rush perspective. I think he had 17 sacks last year in the high school ranks, but will specialize from a speed rush, from a predictable third and long perspective as well. And then there's one other one that I mentioned that I missed on the offensive side of the ball, which was Caden Helms as a tight end. He's a guy that I think it'll be interesting. They're not as deep at that tight end position. You've got Daniel Parker, obviously the transfer from Missouri, but then you got Braden Willis. Those two are about are about the only two that they have that's really played. Has a lot of meaningful snaps, so could see Caden Helms as more of a wide receiver type of tight end. But Jason Llewellyn is another guy who's a freshman who has more of a body type, like a prototypical tight end that you would see. So. And then one other guy, Robert Spears Jennings, who's a true freshman coming in from Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, here in the Tulsa area. I think he might be a backup at one of your safety spots, so could see him getting some time. I don't think I think a lot of people would look for Gentry Williams. I know that he's been impressive. I've not heard a ton about him just in terms of the two deep and things like that, but yeah, I think some of these kids have an opportunity to make a big splash and a big you know playmaking. But I think you'll see a majority of it on the offensive side of the ball, with I think our Mason Thomas having that opportunity to make some moves in predictable third and long situations.
Talking Sooners with all of you each and every Wednesday, 11:30 a.m. Central Time. And so bring some folks with you next week. And again, Jason every so often will pull together an update live. So that's why it's important to subscribe and hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live, because I didn't even know Jason was going live the other day, and I got the bell. I guess I would get notifications for my own channel. I don't even know how that works, but I just noticed that Jason went live. When was that? Yesterday?
I'm trying to. No, it wasn't yesterday. I think it was on Saturday, if I remember right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. All right. Next up, what did we want to hit on? We've got any recruiting notes out there?
Yeah, there's a few. One thing, offensive line commitment, Heath Oziata has just recently got his fourth star on the 247 composite. So doesn't look like it's moved Oklahoma up significantly. I think they're sitting at number 7 right now, just a few percentage points, decimal points, I guess I should say, behind LSU for that 6th spot. So a couple of announcements on Friday. Coming up, you've got Anthony Evans, the wide receiver from Texas, which this one appears to be a little bit of bad news for Oklahoma. Georgia's got in there. I think, I mentioned it's kind of went back and forth. It's been Oklahoma for a while, then it was Georgia, then it started looking maybe like it's leaning a little towards Oklahoma, but he was earlier this week. He was fonged over to Georgia, so we'll see how that, if there's any movement. But I think Oklahoma is probably on the outside looking in here, and so I think what that means for Oklahoma is probably they're done at the wide receiver. They'll maybe look for a transfer from the portal, in the off season, or maybe even later this season if it happens. But I think that's probably where you look at there. Makari Vickers is the other one, from Tallahassee, Florida, 4-star defensive back. I think he's listed as a safety, top 100 overall kid. He will. I think this has been a silent for a while, so would be surprised if it's not Oklahoma there. So then you get another top 100 kid for Oklahoma. Those are the only announcements that I'm tracking right now. Oklahoma is one of the recruiting coordinator, J.R. Sandlin, actually posted something about last night on Twitter about 3 possible ones this week. So I don't know if that's someone else kind of off the radar that we're not necessarily thinking about, but some of the other ones that will continue to go through the year, Jordan Raynaud, defensive lineman, who has been it's been between Oklahoma and Alabama for quite some time. Alabama just got a commitment from a guy that Oklahoma was in on. I think they've kind of backed away. Edric Hill committed to Alabama earlier this week. I think that there was a I'm trying to remember his last name, Keeley. My gosh, I can't remember his last name off the top of my head.
Ringo?
But
Keeley.
no, the guy, gosh, I'll look it up while we're talking. But
Keon Keeley.
Keon Keeley, yeah, that's right. Recently decommitted from Notre Dame. Everybody says this is a guy that's going to Alabama now, so I think that paves the way for Raynaud to come to Oklahoma. Raynaud's another top 100 kid. The saga continues with Peyton Bowen. I'm hearing he still hasn't made any decisions. I've heard more and more positive news on the Oklahoma side of it, but I think we'll continue to watch how that goes. I would think that he would want to make a decision here pretty soon, but this is what I continue to hear. So, and I don't know, Mark. There's going to come a time where if he doesn't solidify this commitment to Oklahoma, and if he says, okay, we're gonna go into the season, see, Oklahoma may move away from him and go elsewhere. I mean, he's now a 5-star, one of the best safety prospects in the country, but at some point you can't be held hostage. But like I said, I do think that there's a lot of positive momentum in the last few days with him in Oklahoma. Then there's a couple of other ones that are coming down the season. I neglected to mention Jordan Raynaud is he's going to be committing, I believe September 19th is his commitment date. You've got a couple of other guys. Tasuliakana, who is an edge player from Utah, is I think Oklahoma's obviously really very very much in the mix. Texas is making a little bit of a move here. Texas is really for as good a recruiting class as they have. They've not really scored very many dynamic DLs or any edge guys, so they're in the mix a little bit. Alabama's in the mix a little bit, but it seems to be an Oklahoma and Texas lead right now. I think a lot of people silently believe that Oklahoma still leads, but he's got 3 or 4 official visits throughout the season. Oklahoma has the last official visit, which is always good. Um, there, and I'm trying to think of anyone, if there's any other ones kind of down the line. Obviously, DJ Hicks is a guy that continues to see very positive things with the relationship between Oklahoma, and I think some of the national people are starting to catch up with that relationship. Still, no movement on his date as of right now, but we'll see. We'll see how that continues to go over the course of this year.
Six Pack has a question here about special teams, and we would certainly ask that everyone look at our video posts from the last 10, 12 weeks. We've broken down positions on the live shows, and those are edited for various segments that you can check out with the offense and the defense. But have you been able to pick up anything, Jason, in regards to the way Brent Venables has discussed special teams approach versus the Lincoln Riley years?
Yeah, so I think Venables and staff actually, and this is, I mean, I try not to make this as a shot to Riley, but I think there's a much bigger emphasis on special teams this year than there has been in the past. One of the things that I've heard from multiple sources is, during at least over the last few years under the Riley regime, they didn't practice it as often as probably they should have. They had the approach of they wanted to, unless they really, really needed a return, played it safe from a punt return perspective, specifically, and fair caught a lot of stuff just by design. And so I think there's a renewed, I guess, Mark, I would just say a renewed emphasis on special teams than there has been in the past. I think you have something that's, you understand that there can be some games won and lost in special teams. Obviously, I mean, you can kind of point to the Oklahoma State last year and possibly one of the big reasons why Oklahoma lost that game. But at the same time, it's a balancing act. But I think you'll see in terms of just from a depth perspective. I think obviously Michael Turk is your punter. I think, this is a fairly recent updated, but it seems like, and this was my projection as well, but it seems like Zach Schmidt has won that place kicking duty for Oklahoma there. And then the punt returners are a little interesting. I think you've got Marvin Mims, who's probably going to be the guy, but I think Bunkley Shelton is working as well at that punt returner side, and I think they're going to want to have some dynamic guys returning the ball, right? Both at the kickoff return and the punt return area, because you have, and one of the things that was interesting is it doesn't look like Drake Stoops is really in that mix. And so you had Drake Stoops returning punts last year from time to time just because they felt very comfortable with his ability to secure the ball. And so, but I think they're looking for more dynamic playmaking out of both the special teams from a punt return and a kickoff return perspective. So I think you'll see that will continue to be something that is a benefit for Oklahoma this year. They've got an off the field special teams guy that came in from Eastern Michigan. You've got Brandon Hall, who has previously been very instrumental in special teams where he's been at Oklahoma a long time ago, and then certainly other other guys as well. And so other places as well, I should say, specifically at Troy. So I think you're going to see some improvement there in the return game especially.
The truth. Asking about Clayton Smith. I was almost certain that Clayton Smith would break out under this staff. Hardly hear anything about him. You guys know anything about his development?
Yeah, I think he's made a big. I think he's made a big turn here in the fall. Has really had a very good fall camp from everything that I've heard. I think he's a guy that will be in the rotation. Certainly, he's. I don't think he'll be a starter, but he'll get some time. He'll get some much more meaningful snaps this year. Maybe a very similar situation to what we had talked about before with R. Mason Thomas. Maybe in more predictable third and long. Um, situations where he has one job and just to go get the quarterback. So, yeah, I think it was a little bit surprising that he didn't make a move at some point last year. And then the spring was sort of similar, but I think absolutely loves the staff. I think there's been some thought process that if he's not getting on the field here, that he was maybe looking at transferring. But no, the kid loves Oklahoma before, and I think he even loves it more. So with the new staff, and so I think he'll get some time this year without a doubt.
I know when we hit some of these recruiting questions and topics in particular, it's difficult to, there's a lot of speculation regarding what's going through a young man's mind. But we've got Malachi Coleman, and we also have an Oklahoma-Nebraska game being played in September. So, do you have any thoughts about maybe him waiting on his decision or that game factoring in at all, or the performance of the two teams this year?
Yeah, it's interesting, Mark. There's a lot of different factors here with this Malachi Coleman recruitment. Obviously, Oklahoma has to overcome a lot with him being in Nebraska's backyard, his parents being a big Nebraska supporter, and so. But I think the key to this, Mark, will be: does Oklahoma still get him on campus? I think if they get him on campus, they have a real opportunity to land him. And yeah, I think there's probably some portion of it that comes down to how both of these teams play during the year. If Nebraska struggles early on, that's nothing but a benefit to Oklahoma. If Oklahoma plays well, I think it's plays well and wins at a high level up until that, at least up until his announcement. I think that's good. I don't at this point, Mark. I don't necessarily, because October 15th I think is his commitment date. I don't necessarily have any lean one way or the other whether if he keeps that date, it's good or bad for Oklahoma. I think if he does move it, it's nothing but good for Oklahoma. But I still think as long as they get him on campus, and I think they have a real good opportunity. And I think to your point, Mark, I think maybe even more so Oklahoma than Nebraska. I mean, I think both of them obviously have a little bit of a different style that they're coming into this year with. I mean, with Mark Whipple at Nebraska, probably throw the ball a little bit more than they've done in the past, and I think with Oklahoma with Levy's offense. You probably maybe run the ball a little bit more than they have in the past, but that they still throw the ball around quite a bit. So we'll see. We'll see how that continues to go. I don't really, like I said. I mean, I think I think Oklahoma's on the outside looking in right now, but if he gets on campus, I think Oklahoma has a really good chance.
And I've got to think that if there's going to be a coaching change at Nebraska, that if he waits Malachi Coleman all the way to National Signing Day, which is roughly December 15th, whatever that middle Wednesday is of that week, then that coaching change would have already taken place. So let's say Nebraska has whatever year that they have, that if I'm Malachi Coleman, I'm judging Nebraska more on its season than I am Oklahoma. Yeah. Because Oklahoma's program has been rock solid, stable. I know that there's a new coaching staff, but rock solid, stable as an elite program year after year after year after year forever, 20 years. And even if Brent Venables has a bad season at 7-5, let's say, there would be some doubt there to say, okay, well, this is his first year. It wouldn't be like Dabo Sweeney having a bad year where, okay, he's got 10 years of credibility there that can back up a down 10-3 season last year. As opposed to Nebraska, Scott Frost has done nothing there but lose. And if he just tacks on another, let's say, marginal season and they keep him, I would have little hope or little faith that I'm going to a program that's going to win. If Scott Frost goes 6-6 this year and they keep him, then I don't know what that's really telling recruits, except this guy's been here for 5 years and he's taken over a program that's been winning 9 games for the last 20 years. And now they're winning 4 or 6 games every year.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right, Mark. And I think, maybe he holds out early on here, and that's maybe why he hasn't made a commitment, to your point, just to see what this first half of this year looks like for Nebraska. If he feels like they're ready to make that move to be more of a consistent winner, to your point. But yeah, I mean, if part of that's really, if a lot of his decision is going off of how productive the team is, I think Oklahoma obviously has an advantage there.
All right, folks, this is our Oklahoma show that we present each and every Wednesday. And I know you shouldn't necessarily care, but just to inform you about scheduling situations now, we are now up against the Ohio State live stream that we do on the Ohio State channel at 1:30 Eastern time. So we're going to check out a couple minutes early so I can get that fired up over there. But we appreciate everybody being here. Wednesday, 11:30 a.m. Central Time is your time. Please hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live. All right, Jason, thank you so much for making this happen. And next week will be game week.
That's right. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.